Well, my friend, you have just stumbled into a gold mine of exploration into the human experience I like to call a level deeper. So go ahead and grab a shovel or whatever it is that's used to mine gold, and let's get ready to dig in. So one of the many reasons I started this show is to encourage and support my own exploration, because I gotta admit, previous versions of me were pretty closed off. I mean, I had my beliefs of what was true in the world and what wasn't, and had a whole category of things I wrote off as illogical or not realistic because they didn't make sense in what today's guest, Martha Arnett, refers to as the big brain.
We have a big brain, and then we think we need to rely on the big brain. Now, we need to rely on the big brain, but it needs to be in partnership with our inner knowing, with our inner GPS.
What is this inner knowing and inner GPS? Martha refers to that as our intuition. As for my relationship with my intuition, distant, but improving. Like, I'd probably have to set my Facebook relationship status to my intuition as it's complicated. So Martha started her career as a more traditionally trained psychotherapist until one day she felt like there was an element that she was missing in her toolbox to help her clients. So she tapped into a new tool and tested it during a session.
I'll never forget, she puts her hand on the doorknob and she turns around and she says, "Martha, I don't know what that was. I don't know where that information came from for you, but I do know that something inside of me shifted and I really feel different and I feel like some tiny part of me healed."
Today on the show, Martha takes us deep into this idea of intuition. What is it? How does it help us? Why do we need it? How do we repair or develop our relationship with this sense of knowing that Martha says is in all of us?
That's become my expertise, is helping people reconnect with their inner knowing, with what they know to be true for them, only them.
Martha and I explore how we are taught to think instead of feel, and how our emotions and experiences can actually show up in our bodies in unexpected ways. Near the end of the episode, Martha actually leads me through an exercise live on the show where I examine a tense part of my body and develop a relationship with it and learn from it. And if that sounds odd to you, awesome. Stay. This is your chance to explore something new, so stick around for that. I know I really enjoyed this conversation with Martha, and I think you're going to enjoy it too. It's the latest episode of A Level Deeper. It's with Martha Arnett, and it's starting right now. I want to open up with soul coaching. Tell me about it's such an interesting concept to me. It's something that it feels like a unique approach that you have, something that I haven't heard before. Explain to me what soul coaching means and the work that you do.
Great. Okay. Soul coach came about because I was trained almost 30 years ago as a psychotherapist. And the story goes, and also I've super been into metaphysics and intuition and the psychic space and all of that forever, my whole life, when I finally was introduced to it. And I say kind of re-met it again, because I feel like I came into this lifetime as everyone does, as an intuitive. I didn't really understand what was happening. But in my 20s, I lived in Philadelphia and I found a metaphysical bookstore. So I grew up in Michigan, where I grew up. Nothing like that was around for me to understand. And even I'd never heard of therapy. And I mean, none of things that are in my world now were my world growing up. But I always knew there was something greater and bigger and outside of myself. For me, it felt like that was where I was drawn and where I was called. So when I met the metaphysical world, I knew that was part of my gifts this lifetime. I met them through understanding I was a highly sensitive person. I was an empath. So the soul coaching thing came about when I was probably 15 years into my therapy career. And I was sitting with a client. It was the first session. It was a new client. And there was so much sadness and trauma and anger and upset in the room. And I wasn't new to it at this point, right? I'd worked with a lot of trauma. Her history was so filled with pain. And I remember in that moment thinking, there's nothing I can say that will help this person. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing anyone could say. There's nothing anyone could do. And my mind was whirling and whirling and whirling. And I'm starting to feel horrible and yucky because I think this woman is just going to feel horrible her whole life and nothing's going to work. And then something really, really remarkable happened. Just a silence came over me, like it literally just everything cleared inside of my mind. And then everything just went still in my body. It was really remarkable. And I remember just sitting there being this open vessel, like all my thoughts were gone. And I just remember, and so I continued to listen. And when she was done telling me her story, information just flowed through me. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it was. I didn't even remember it right after I said it. Like I had no idea what was going on. But she stood up. I'll never forget. She like puts her hand on the doorknob and she turns around and she says, Martha, I don't know what that was. I don't know where that information came from for you, but I do know that something inside of me shifted and I really feel different. And I feel like some tiny part of me healed. And she turned around and she left. And I remember standing there thinking to myself, thank you, universe, for this very clear example, because I knew I had been doing that all along. And so there was a part of me inside that felt like I wasn't honoring what I was doing by calling it therapy. And then the soul coaching thing came by me. It was a long process of me beginning to kind of come out of the closet with the work that I actually do. Obviously, never forgetting the therapy piece, because that's just sort of who I am now. And then I became a coach too. I took the courses that you need to do and all that. And I incorporated all of that. And so I thought, what a beautiful, rich offering I can offer to people. And then I kind of wasn't sure how far along, like how much of the psychic stuff do I reveal? Because it doesn't really matter if the client knows how I get the info. They don't care, really. They just want me to be helpful. So when I finally just settled on the word soul coach, it took me a while to get there because I felt like, I don't want to disregard all my millions of years of therapy experience or my coaching expertise, but anybody can call themselves a coach. So I kind of kept that separate. And then I was like, you know what? It's how you make people feel. It really, really doesn't matter what you call yourself. It doesn't matter what I do. It matters how I can be of service to someone.
I want to go back to this word intuitive. And you mentioned that you felt like later in your life, you kind of came back to your intuitive nature that correct me if I'm wrong, that you believe we're all intuitive. We're all born with that. And then you sort of rekindled that connection with your intuitive nature. Tell me more about the belief that we are all intuitive when we're born. What does that actually mean?
Okay, I love that you asked that. I'm writing a course right now called The Intuitive Entrepreneur. I actually am a really weird person. I'm a kind of a strange cat in that I never really disconnected from my intuition, even as a teenager. I have stories where I did not listen to my intuition, but I always knew what it was telling me. I've always been connected to my intuition. So intuition is our sixth sense. I would like to argue it's actually our first. But think about kids. Kids know when they feel okay around someone and when they don't feel comfortable around someone. They know before they're socialized to, prioritize their intellect over their feeling, their gut feeling or their inner knowing. If you really think about intuition, it is your energy. I go right here. You can't see it, but I'm touching my solar plexus. Like for me, all my information, so much of my information comes in through my solar plexus and then my chest space. My nose coming through my solar plexus. My yeses coming through my chest. Intuition is a body. It's a felt sense. And we also not just told that we should, how do you think about that? What do you think about that? All right. Rather than how do you feel about that? Right. We're quickly socialized as kids. You watch it happen, socialized and instructed to rely on and to trust what we think about rather than how we feel. And so we have a big brain and then we think we need to rely on the big brain. Now we need to rely on the big brain, but it needs to be in partnership with our inner knowing, with our inner GPS. That's why people get off and they get confused and they don't understand what's going on because they are trying to rely on their intellect. Looking inside, that's become my expertise, is helping people reconnect with their inner knowing, with what they know to be true for them, only them. I don't know what's true for them. You don't know what's true for them. They know what's true for them. Only them. And, but it takes a while to trust it again. We have it and then we lose it because we're told, and not everybody loses it, but then often we do. And then it's how do we reconnect?
Yeah. Tell me more about this thinking versus feeling. Why do you think societally we prioritize and teach people to do more thinking and less feeling? Because I can really resonate with that. I've been on my own journey, I would say, the past couple of years in getting more in touch with the feeling side of my physical body, of my emotional self, and in sort of accepting that is a valid way to think and to make decisions. And, you don't always have to be, I'm a very logical person. And so I'm trying to be more open to the fact that I can take feeling, I can take intuition and things that I'm sensing in my gut. I can use that as valid, data to make decisions. Yes. Why do you think as a society, we prioritize the thinking over the feeling?
Because thinking is masculine. And it's connected to the patriarchy. And I don't mean like, but I do mean patriarchy. Like it is connected. So we are run by a masculine schema, like we are all governed by that, right? Businesses, and it just trickles down. Like that is what is valued, that way of thinking, that way of being. If you think of yin and yang, right? Like that, it's supposed to be in balance. What is really nice is that you, as a young man, are now being allowed to have a larger emotional range than young men were, say 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, for sure. What a gift for you, right? I always say with my clients, men can have two emotions. They can be happy. Well, they can be happy or they can be angry. That's what they used to get, right? They don't get sad. They don't get the whole gamut, right? Well, we get those as women, but they're not respected. You can see how that plays out, right? How people are expected to behave and what is honored, what is valued, what is respected, and what is trusted. Trusted, it looks like linear thinking. It looks like facts. Now, all of that is important, linear thinking, all those things, but we've got to pair it. We have to go hand in hand with the intuition. There used to be, and there still are, I'm sure, I'm just not informed, about cultures that were guided by the feminine, by the more feminine. And feminine, I don't mean female. And masculine, I don't mean male.
Tell me more about that really quickly. Just when I'm saying masculine, when you're not referring to gender, explain to us what you mean when you're saying masculine and feminine.
So they're really, we took these qualities, these emotional qualities, and we assigned them to a gender. They don't belong to a gender. Just because there's a body that has a particular anatomy doesn't mean those emotions our society here especially assigned them to genders. Our work as human beings is to balance out the masculine and the feminine, hence that yin yang from long ago. You're saying you are reclaiming for yourself the ability to have a larger emotional range. Maybe you're going to want to feel sad. Maybe you're going to feel joyous. Maybe you're going to feel grateful. Maybe you're going to feel emotional about something that other people would find. Whatever the range is, you're reclaiming that as something that you get to experience. Again, if you watch little kids, they have it. They have that range. Little boys, little girls. Little girls have the masculine range, whatever. I don't even like to say that, but that's how we have defined it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Did I explain that very well?
It makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it's just interesting as I reflect on just coming up through schooling and through my professional career to this point in my life and how, I can recognize how I feel like I was sort of taught, or at least I was a very observant person. And it was like, okay, if I excel, if I succeed, if I think and I do well because of that, people celebrate me. And as I got into my professional career, I saw that. It was like the more that I think, the more that I achieve, the more that I make decisions with my logic, the more I seem to be celebrated. And when you're celebrated in the professional world, that brings opportunity, that brings money, that brings prestige, that brings all of these things. So I guess I that makes sense. That kind of it fits with the way that I've experienced so much of the world being set up in that we're rewarded for thinking. And then there's this whole part of us, the feeling side of it, that it feels like it's sort of cast aside. It's kind of like, oh no, if you listen to your gut or your intuition, you're irrational, or you're not thinking logically, or it gets sort of this negative label, it seems like.
Or you do it on the down low, or you do it but you don't talk about it, right? I mean, like Steve Jobs came out and talks a lot about it. Einstein has a bunch of quotes about it. I mean, talk about being an amazing thinker, right? A lot of the high-end creatives, that is where they are led from, is their intuition. But nobody really talks about that, because you're right. This world still honors and respects the linear, the left brain. So it's left brain is where our linear thinking, our logic. The right brain is the creative, the imaginative, spatial, that sort of thing.
I started this podcast for a very specific reason. I crave meaningful conversations and wanted to create an outlet to have more of them in my life. By recording discussions I was already having with friends and new conversations with new people, I guess I just wanted to bring deeper, more thoughtful conversations to a larger audience, because I think we all have an opportunity to grow from them. I got to tell you, it makes me uncomfortable to do so, but I'm asking for your help. I'm imagining a show funded by the people who want to support deeper conversations. So for the cost of 2 coffees per month, you can help keep this show going, and as a thank you, get access to some exclusive behind-the-scenes content that isn't available anywhere else. In the episode description is a link to our Patreon where you can pledge your support and automatically get access to all the bonuses. So after the show, I'd love if you'd head there and check it out, and thank you in advance for your support. Okay, back to the episode. So if I'm someone listening to this conversation right now, and I'm thinking like, okay, I get it, Martha, I hear you. I get this idea of intuition. I don't actually know how to begin listening or paying attention. I don't know what my intuition is. I don't know how to get in touch with it. I don't know. How does someone start that process if they're so unfamiliar with the whole concept in general?
Oh, it's such a great question. And I love, love, love talking about this. So I'll tell you the first thing, and it's the most resistant thing for people, is you've got to learn how to get quiet with yourself. And there's so much resistance because there's so much noise in the world. And until we get comfortable with, I think that's another reason why I never lost touch with my intuition, is I was raised in kind of an interesting rural Michigan. My mom is an artist, and we didn't have a TV. And I grew up, I didn't watch TV ever. So I grew up wandering around when I wasn't working on the farm all of the time, working from age 11. I was wandering the woods, and I got to be really, really comfortable with what was happening inside of me. It was just what I did. I just was always tuning into myself. And as I grew up and lived alone in different cities, I lived alone in Philly, I lived alone everywhere, because I'm also a really highly sensitive person. So I loved having my space. But when I lived alone, I never thought to get a TV. Back then, I think the only thing I had was like a CD player. And this was all throughout my 20s, and never crossed my mind to like put stuff into my space. And so I was always writing, journaling, but I didn't think to do anything differently. It was really weird. So in a way, what a gift is that I really, really learned what my inner truth and inner self, capital S, the essence of me feels like when I am in an aligned space. And then I can feel when I'm off. I can almost feel exactly how off it is. So I would say to people, just to give some direct suggestions for them to be in, is you've got to be off your electronics for a period of time every day. We have to remember what it feels like when we have an aligned inner system, whether it's our nervous system, because boy, is that activated most of the time for most people these days, right? And so for me, part of the reason we moved out to Santa Fe, it was a total intuitive move. I literally came out here 2 days later. I was like, oh shit, I have to move the whole family. And I have 3 teenagers. I had to move out here, and they were ticked off because they grew up where they grew up in Chicago. And I knew this was it. And nobody like fought me, but they did not want to go. But they know when mom gets an intuitive hit, we do that thing.
Can you explain that to us a little bit deeper as far as like when you say you came out to New Mexico and you were just like, I know we have to move out here. Explain, I don't know what that felt like or what you experienced that made you feel so confident and clear that this is the next step. And I'm going to uproot my family and we're going to move out to New Mexico. We
knew I had actually I pick a word every year. And the year that we moved out here was 2021, I think, the word for the year was expansion. I knew I needed to feel expansive. I was not feeling expansive. I was struggling with trying to keep my mood up during those 8 months out of the year where it's gray. And I just was sitting in front of happy lights and spending so much time managing my mood in that weather. And so I knew, and I intuitively knew it was going to be west. And I never thought about Santa Fe. It never crossed my mind. And I thought probably Colorado just because it felt most accessible somehow. So I never even thought of New Mexico. And I had a friend who moved out here and she said, why don't you visit? So I came out. By the second day, I'll tell you the moment I knew. It was March and it was sunny and gorgeous. But I'll tell you what it was for me is we were walking up a hiking trail, and the warmth from the sun was hitting the pine and the pinon trees. And they emit this smell that is just, it's the smell of this candle that I'm burning because I cannot get enough of it. It's also the smell of this essential oil right here because I cannot get enough of it. It is a soul home smell for me. And my soul immediately said, oh my God, this is the place. And I knew it. And then I started to get panicky because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell my kids. They're going to think I'm a liar. I'm going to move us out here. And that was it. It was the smell of the trees in the warmth in March as I was hiking. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. And then what was so cool, Chad, was, yes, I went back and kids were so mad. Husband couldn't believe it either. He was like, oh my God, are you kidding? Are we really doing this? And within 6 weeks, the house was sold and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it happened so fast. The universe just aligned. I'm all about that. Yeah, that was that. But as we were going on the surface, this is what I want to say to people. On the surface, kids were angry. We're trying to sell a house. There was so much angst. I had so much anxiety. But I'll tell you, underneath that, it was quiet. And I could access the quiet, and I knew it was right. So I never questioned it. But yes, there was tons of surface anxiety. So I want to say things can be hard, but if you can learn to really tune in to the truth of you, then that will always be there for you. And you will know beneath all of the surface angst or whatever it is you're experiencing that you can access the truth for you.
Take me back to this moment where you go from intuition to panic, because my sort of theory is that everyone has these moments where they feel something, kind of pulling at them. And like they have that moment that you had in New Mexico where you're kind of like, something is making me feel like I should make some decision. And then I think it's so relatable that you shared that you still went into that panic mode, because then I imagine, and I've experienced, you go into the panic mode and then you can never come back from it. So that panic mode leads to anxiety. It leads to, all these stories. And it's just like, well, that was a crazy idea in the first place. There's no way I could do that. I don't know. How do people move from panic to listening again and being open?
That. Yes. So it's about trusting. Half the work I do is about trust. You have to trust that what you feel and where you're feeling that pull or that longing is true for you. First, we have to remember we have it. Then we have to learn how to hear what it's telling us. Like, well, how do we get the messaging? Do you hear it through words? Does it come in through your body and your knowing? Is it a felt sense? Like, what is it for you? Or you probably have different ways of receiving the messaging from your intuition, from your inner knowing. And then it's trusting that what you hear is true. Have you ever heard anybody say, dang, I wish I wouldn't have done what my intuition said. I wish I would. I had that instinct to not walk down that alley. I wish I would have. I mean, nobody ever in the history of ever, I think, has said, geez, I wish I wouldn't have followed my intuition. Nobody. People often say, dang it, why didn't I follow my gut? And so it's learning to trust that again. But I really do think the important piece of the story is there will be surface emotions. Those are our thoughts, right? Our thoughts create our feelings. Our feelings create, our body's experience. And so we're going to have those. I'm going to have thoughts. I'm going to have thoughts that I'm really bummed that I have to upset my kids. I'm going to feel the energy of their anger. I'm going to feel the sadness leaving the community that I created for 20 years. Those are going to be normal. I will experience those. And yet, I'm sure I was able to make that decision because this is what I've worked on for many, and I've always done it my whole life. Like I've been in touch with my intuition, and not to say that I've always followed it, but I've always known what was right for me.
Do you think it's sort of like a muscle or something that we can practice and strengthen? Like if we start becoming more open to our intuition and we start to trust it a little bit more, in that process of building trust, does it become easier?
1,000,000%. It's like you can't go lift one weight and walk out and have a really strong bicep. I mean, you've got to like practice and practice and practice and practice. Absolutely. It can, and there's really cool things that you can begin to practice with. So let's say you're driving home and you always take the same route. Let's say something pops into your mind. And I will say your mind. Let's say it pops into your mind. Hey, I kind of want to turn right instead of I normally turn left. Turn right. That is you beginning to follow your intuitive pull. Now, don't look. I mean, you can look for there may be no reason you were asked to turn right other than your intuition is saying, are you going to listen? So that's one way to build. Or maybe it's like, maybe your intuition is like, I really don't want spaghetti tonight. I really want a salad, whatever it is. Like that's, people talk about intuitive everything, intuitive eating, intuitive friendships, right? What friendships feel right? Like it's all about what feels. How do I feel? Right? And honoring that. Those are little tiny weightlifting moments, right? To build the muscle of the intuition. It's beginning to honor it and then pay attention. Another thing, really cool way that you could, right here in the room, you could do, Chad, you could just say, one of the first practices is as you're sitting there in the morning or whenever, you look around, you say, there's a plant, there's a lamp, there's a diffuser for my essential oil, there's another plant, there's a lamp. Is you ground yourself in present time. Now, why? Why is that? Because our being in the present moment, right? We're always behind, looking back or looking forward, hence feeling sad and depressed, hence feeling anxious, right? We all are familiar with that at this point. But if we can be in the present moment, if we're safe, if we're comfortable, if our needs are being met in this moment, we can sit here and we can look around and say, ground ourselves in current time. That is the best practice. That is the best way to start connecting to your intuition, is to get it really present. And you are a human that seems like you have the gift of being present. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, it's thank you for saying that and noticing or recognizing. I think that's been something that has felt important to me for a long time. I when it comes to when I'm doing something, I often have this difficult relationship with like my phone and with communication, specifically from the standpoint of, I've always said like I'm a bad communicator, I'm a bad texter, I don't get back to people. But every time I think about that and why that is, I think about the fact that whenever I'm doing something, being on my phone is a barrier to experiencing whatever I'm doing in the moment. If I'm having a conversation with someone, then stopping for 10 seconds even to send a text message is taking me out of that moment. And I'm not being a good listener. I'm not being present. Even if we're in the van and we're just sitting, in front of the mountains, and if I'm doing something else, then I'm not there. So yeah, I do put a lot of intention behind being where I am. And I think we talked about you mentioned silence earlier and the importance of silence. I actually wrote an article probably 5 or 6 years back about how I thought that silence was golden. And I just talked about when is the last time that you truly experienced silence in your life? And I think for a lot of people, that could be days, weeks, potentially years. Why do you think as humans, why do you think we're so resistant to that silence?
Because within the silence lives all of the unanswered questions that we have that live within us, right? And most of us want to not look at those unanswered questions or those unaddressed feelings. And so, we avoid. And now there's a million ways to avoid it with all the external stuff. And people are often honest about that. They're like, hey, I don't like what comes up for me when it's quiet. And I say, I get that. And like, there's the key to your peace, inner peace. There's the key to your accessing your next level of learning.
What is it that we're afraid of? If we get silent and we start to pay attention, what are we afraid of?
We're afraid something's going to come in that's going to overwhelm our system. Usually, like it's going to overwhelm us. We're not going to know what to do with it. People say to me often, I feel like if I start crying, I won't stop. Or they feel like if the feeling that this unpleasant feeling comes up and over, that it will overwhelm, they will shut down and they will cease to be productive or live or all those things. And, depending on what it is they're worried about or that they've sort of tamped down. Now, tamping things down is a really effective coping strategy. Some people need to. Some people don't have access to people to help walk them through if it's a big T or a little T trauma. I say little T too, because little T's are impactful. Little T trauma meaning you're young and your parent forgets you at the school, right? And you're 5. This is probably before cell phones or whatever. You're 5 and you're sitting on, this must have happened to me because I give this example all the time, but I'm sitting on the curb and I'm waiting. And pretty soon a story comes in my mind, right? No one loves me. They forgot me. I'm going to sleep over on the ground here. I'm going to starve. What's going to happen? Someone's going to kidnap me. And then all that terror from that moment gets locked away in my body as the car pulls up. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Or no apology, whatever. They just pull up and they're like, get in. And I've now taken that terror that I created from being forgotten. It's in my body somewhere and it lives there. And now I periodically will filter some of my current time experiences through that pain of that terror of being forgotten and unloved, right? And that's how our brain and our system works. But think about how impactful that could be. I'm unloved, right? I'm not wanted. I wasn't important enough for people to remember me. And then the feeling of terror attached to it, right? And so little moments like that happen all of the time. There's no way that they can't. We all have those. And so even if you didn't have a big T trauma, car accident, serious physical or sexual trauma, medical trauma, right? When you're young, you're in the hospital. Like, because we are energy bodies, right? And so all of this stays energetically in our bodies until we can move it through. And obviously our brain is a super machine that stores all that stuff for us too.
Tell me more about this idea of when you say we are energy bodies and we store things in our bodies. It's been interesting for people who are listening, as Martha has used the word at times, feeling. You're physically touching, like your heart or your stomach. You're physically touching your body. Talk to me about the connection between the things that we feel and our actual physical body.
Yeah, that is so cool. So what is so neat about when I met this model, Internal Family Systems, it's created by Dick Schwartz. I was actually one of the last groups that Dick trained personally. And he's now all over. Have you heard of it? You kind of nod your head. Have you heard about it? It's talked about a lot.
I'm actually not familiar.
Oh, it's super amazing. He was the one that talked about, we have a self energy. I go here again. So it's like heart chakra space, but like self energy is a capital S, and that is the essence of who we are. And then we have all of these parts. Some of them are brought in through when we're born, through ancestors and things. And then a lot of them we accumulate as we go, and we store them in our body. So it may live in your shoulder. I mean, a lot, now they know the Eastern Western medicine has come together a little bit to say the body stores, or Van der Kolk wrote that book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's all about trauma and the body holding the trauma. It's now talked about, I think Eastern medicine has known this forever and ever. Amen. Right? Acupuncture, all the things, right? That the acupuncture addresses the energy system. Now there's people out there doing, and I'm trained in Reiki and all the things. So we're beginning to recognize our bodies are all energy bodies. Matter of fact, the chakras, we talk about the top 7, but there's many, many, many. And it's just where the inside of us matches the outside of us, and energy meets, right? And energy meets and energy meets and energy meets. And it's how those two interact. And it's now become common knowledge. They've learned how to test for that. Chakras are a legit thing now. We can measure it, which that's awesome that we can we need left brain information. I get that. I need that sometimes too. So, everything has energy. This little bottle has energy. This pen has energy. Everything contains energy. We know that, right? Molecules move, atoms move. Well, our bodies do too. And energetically, some of us are super highly impacted by our environments, by lighting. There's, our environment, the smells for me impact me really deeply. It's part of my energetic body. It's part of the way I'm wired. I'm highly sensitive human also. And so I know my nervous system is a bit more receptive to environmental factors. And that's just a wiring thing. It also helps me be highly, highly intuitively receptive. I don't know if that answered your actual question, but the energy body in general. And then we store things. How they get stored, I'm actually not sure how they get stored, to be honest. It's a brain process, I think.
Well, yeah, I think that storing part is really interesting to me. In the last maybe year or so, I've just become more open to the fact that, for example, I've dealt with chronic pain in my neck and in my shoulders, and I've recently been introduced to the idea of the chakras and learning about the throat chakra, and that there's been things that I've needed to process and get out, things I've needed to say, my voice that I've needed to actually use. And in doing so, I start to just notice maybe I'm sitting back a little bit better or more comfortable, and I'm physically not feeling some of the tension. And so it's just been interesting. I haven't really had that relationship with my emotional self and my physical self. I've always considered them to be two very separate things, and I've never really considered the fact that maybe there's something there. So it sounds like you're saying, we store these different things that happen to us, maybe in different parts of our bodies. And if we don't go into that silence, if we don't process them, then what happens to all of this stored energy?
Yes, it can come out through the physical illnesses. I always say it comes out sideways. It comes out in ways that are uncomfortable. And I'll tell you why. Because it wants you to pay attention to it. So let's say this pain that you have here, let's say it's connected to a part, to an old part, and it's starting to get extra activated. Could be partly because of the way you're sitting and all that. If you take care of that, the physical piece, and there's still pain, then I would say a way to so if you want to go directly to it, Chad, I would guide you in here's the thing, is most people go away from the pain.
What do you mean by that?
So if this hurts, I'm just going to take a Advil, and then I'm just going to write my stuff. I'm going to forget about it, right? And I'm going to override it. But what I would say is you literally go to the part. So I would close my eyes. I would get a sensation. What is this? I guide people through this all the time in session, is what does it feel like? What is that sensation in your neck and your shoulders feel like? Are you open to being guided through that? You want to just give it a try?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just close your eyes for a sec and just bring your awareness to that part of your neck. Would you say it's more in your neck or your shoulders right now?
Right now, I would say my shoulders.
Okay. So just bring your awareness to your shoulders. And as you're noticing the physical sensation there, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I'm just noticing my sort of posture and the way that I feel my body is making this closed shape or figure. It feels rounded and kind of closed off. I don't know. That's what I notice immediately.
Good, good. Yeah. So just stay with that. Stay with that rounded and closed noticing, really. And if that part in the shoulder, you kind of told me, but if that part in the shoulder had a shape, what shape would it be?
Yeah, I don't know. Right now, I think of like a circle.
Mm-hmm. And if that circle had a color, what color would it be?
I thought of blue immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What shade of blue?
Like a deeper, darker blue.
And is that circle like 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional? Well, what is it?
I don't know. I'm picturing flat. So one, I guess, well, 1-dimensional, 2-dimensional.
Yeah, I always forget what's what, but yeah. So flat, dark blue. And what's the surface texture?
I don't know. It's a little kind of smooth, but a little bit rough.
Yeah, good. So just notice that flat, circular, dark blue part. Just bring your like you're observing it. And as you're looking at that circular dark blue part, Chad, what are you feeling toward it?
I'm just having this sense of feeling a little bit more familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed it, and that feels I don't know, good. Feel yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it feels familiar. And what else? You said it feels good.
Yeah, it feels like I don't know, feels like it's wanting to be noticed.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. So just let it know inside your own mind that you see it, that you notice it. And then in your own mind, I want you to ask that part, that navy or that dark blue part, just say in your mind to it, say, what would you like me to know about you?
I'll share for the sake of the the show and the podcast. You know, I was just hearing the two words "be true," which I guess I sort of associate with "be true" to me and who I am. That was what I heard.
Beautiful. So if we were working together, we would find out the age of the part. You can see now what's cool is you have this image, right? You have this navy blue or this dark blue circle. First of all, I feel like go in just for a second, just thank it. Thank it for trusting you and sharing that information with you. And if you think, Chad, that you will be back to have a conversation with it, you can let it know. If you're not sure, don't say that. It's really important that we honor and respect those parts of us.
Yeah, it's just it's so interesting. I've never really been led through an experience like that before. So it's very interesting. It feels foreign, exploring some of this, physical sensation, giving it an actual shape and color and texture and acknowledging it and thanking it for, and so yeah, it's a really interesting experience in actually bringing some sort of awareness and label and in life to this pain and tension. Not something I've ever experienced before.
And what I want to point out to you, which was so cool, was you know what you did. I would ask you, and as you know, that was just the very beginning of the process that I take people through. Like we go on and on about that. But what I say to you, I would ask you, what's the shape? You would say, I don't know, circle. You knew, right? Yeah. And I would say, what color is it? I don't know, blue. But people do that. They're like, I don't know, whatever it is. And so I want to show you, I want to reflect back to you how much you actually do know, how connected you actually are.
Yeah, and it's funny, but it's this, whether it's like a lack of trust or confidence in, saying, I don't know, this thing, or, feeling like, I'm not sure why it's a circle, and so I don't know, why that is, or I feel like it's maybe I'm not confident in it, or I feel like it's silly for a moment, and so I think, you have that moment of like, oh, I'm not sure, I'm almost trying to discredit some of this, or like bring light to this sort of weird or uncomfortable feeling. But then it is amazing how I've just kind of learned that through my own therapy of like, when something immediately pops into my mind after I'm asked a question or taught to thought, or asked to think about something, I've learned the process of like, just say it. There's almost every single time, probably every single time, there's been a reason that thing has entered my mind. And so I've I have built up some of that muscle or relationship of just like, when it comes in, just say it, because there's probably a reason. But it is still funny how that logical mind tries to get in the way just for a split second. I don't know. Blue.
Yeah, I don't know, but I actually do know. I love that. But I think it also gives us permission, at least for me, like when if I ever feel that, like, I don't know, it really, for me, it also means it may change. And that's what I always say to people, for now. It is a blue, navy blue circle for now. When you go back in, if you go back in, and often when someone gets to know a part of themselves and they have been able to identify a color and a shape and all that, I'll say every time you take, a drink of water, just say hello to it. Every time you tie your shoe, just say, hey, I see you, right? It's all about building a relationship with the part. But I also want to say, you may go in one day and it's a yellow triangle, or it's a flower. I don't know. There's no right way, and it's forever changing. When I gave myself permission to know it's forever changing, right now, what is it for now? I love those words, for now. What is it for now?
Can you explain a little bit why did you lead me through that practice? What is sort of the purpose or intention behind assigning a shape and a color and a texture? Why?
Yeah, because Dick Schwartz, who created the model, found out through working with really severely challenged people with eating disorders that when they went in and began to get to know the parts of themselves that often didn't look like a young version of them that had experienced trauma or whatever, that once you begin to make something visual for a lot of people, then they can, now it's me speaking, I don't know if Dick says this stuff anymore, but like, we can then revisit it. We can create a relationship with it. I've had clients that have made their part, it was a blue, sparkly, 3-dimensional cube. And she created it and she sits it on her work desk. And so now she has a relationship. So really the work is to create, because it is an internal family system. And we, as the leaders of the system, ignore all of our members of our family, mostly in there. And so the work is to not get rid of it. But if you were to go in, right, I have this quote here that says, we all want to be seen, known, and understood. That is the foundation of the work that I bring into the world. I want to see other people deeply. I want to know them truly. And I want to help them feel understood in the most genuine way possible. And I want to do that all with this really open heart and non-judgment. And so we want to take that and turn that into our system. So if we have to create a visual for us to begin to create and build a bridge of relationship with that part of ourself, you may then find something lives in your solar plexus a lot. Like when you have to make a decision, then you might want to tune in. And also what's cool, Chad, is the ultimate goal of the work is that part is carrying. So this part of you here is carrying, or I guess it's more here, is carrying an emotional experience of yours. And the idea is you want to release it. You want to unburden, is the terms we use in IFS. You want to unburden that part from having to carry the weight of that experience. So the goal is, let's use my getting forgotten example. And let's say I carry that right here, right? If I can release and unburden it, there's through the process that I walk people through. I use the IFS, but I also use all my intuitive stuff. And we can release and unburden the feeling that is there, you will always have the memory, but the intense emotion or the emotion won't be connected to it anymore. Does that make sense? So you will always have the memory, but sometimes when we have memories back to the thing, we get, right? We feel it in our bodies. Sometimes we don't know where we feel it in our bodies. But if we can release and heal, unburden that part of you that carries the emotional history with it, then you will no longer have that in your energetic body.
It makes it feel so much. I mean, it turns it into this tangible thing, tangible object. And so it's not just this nebulous sort of feeling that I have in my body. It's just interesting how it creates this. Okay, I can picture it, and now now that I can picture this shape and this texture, it does make it feel more familiar. It makes it feel like it's more accessible to be revisited in the future. So I can see how that the intention behind that process.
It also separates it from you, because you are not it. You are you are the self energy and the essence of you. That's the most important thing, is literally separating out the little t trauma or big T trauma from who you are. Like, you are not your anxiety. Let's say you had anxiety. You are not your anxiety. You have a part of you that is anxious. You are not your depression. You have a part of you that carries the feelings of being depressed. That is the most important distinction, is that we recognize our parts are just aspects of us. They are not the truth of us. The truth of us is our self energy, our essence.
Well, that feels like a difficult distinction to make. I would say that I get lost often in separating myself from these things that I'm experiencing, or my identity, or they become intermingled with what I associate as my identity. So I feel like that's a difficult distinction to make.
Yeah, I think when you make something physical and concrete, like a blue circle, then you are the observer of it, right? You are acknowledging it. You are looking at it separate from yourself. Then that is the most important thing that you can do.
I'm just sort of processing. It's been a beautiful conversation. As we start to wrap up, I just want to thank you for sharing and for guiding me through this experience. As I said, I think so much of why I wanted to start the show is that there are people and concepts and things in the world that I just think, why shouldn't we be open to them? Why shouldn't we be open to learning more about them and seeing how they might impact our lives? And so that's my hope through some of these conversations, is that I can experience new things personally because I want to grow, I want to learn, and I hope that people listening can be open to something different. Maybe they've never become familiar with the idea of intuition or assigning, some of the pain or trauma in their bodies and giving it, this sort of tangible feeling. So I'm grateful to you for sharing your wisdom with us and your experience with us, because I think it's very valuable. If people want to find you, get in touch with you, what are some ways that they might be able to do that?
Oh, thanks. My website is just marthaarnett.com. I am on Instagram, Martha Soul Coach. And I just started Facebook. I think it's Martha Soul Coach also. So I'm just learning how to do that. But I'm going to have this new course coming up called The Intuitive Entrepreneur. It really is just, it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur or not. It just walks you through the steps. I have a freebie out called The Empowered Entrepreneur, and it helps people, kind of walks people through some of these steps too. And it was so cool. In this Intuitive Entrepreneur, I talk about working with your throat chakra. So I love that if we're gonna, and I was thinking, like, what is the bridge between identifying parts inside of ourselves and then intuition? And I would say, intuition is a body experience, and so is healing at the deepest level. Our body stores in our energy body, in our physical body. Our traumas are stored in our body, and intuition comes in through the body. So if you really want to be a clear channel, or you really want to begin to, you just need to know, oh, this is a part. Oh, this is this, right? So that when you get the information and you want to trust the intuitive information, if that's a part of you that's coming up, or if this is your intuition telling you something. So I think, like, doing a lot of that internal work that it sounds like you've been doing, it will help you begin to know what's an intuitive hit for me and what is a part that's getting triggered. Or does that make sense?
It does. I can definitely see that. I feel like I'm at least making progress in being able to distinguish between the two, but I think it's a ever ongoing thing as well.
Oh, it is, for sure, for all of us. But you seem like you're pretty in touch. It's awesome.
I'm trying.
You
well,
are.
Thank you. It's people like you who are helping me get there. So again, thank you for having this conversation with me. I will put a link to Martha's website in the show notes of this episode. So if you're listening, you can find her website there. And thanks for your time, Martha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been such a joy and such a pleasure. I appreciate it. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Folks, thank you. Really, thank you for tuning in to my conversation with Martha. I just continue to find it to be such a rewarding experience to have these conversations and host this show. And so thank you for listening. It really means a lot. If you've made it this far and you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a rating on whatever platform you're listening on, as it really means a lot and helps us grow the show. And lastly, I've got the link to the Patreon included in the show notes, where you can make a donation to this show and support meaningful conversations like the one that we have here. Much love, much gratitude. We'll see you next time.